You ate a porpoise.
Not the whole thing.
But eating any amount of porpoise is insane.
Okay, you know what? You sound like the guy from the aquarium right now. That's you.
And then we'll go camping.
Fuck yeah, we'll go camping. I would love to go camping with you, man. Fuck.
Yes. Let's do it.
Hey, guys, what's going on?
Hey, Heath, what's up with Cecil and Eli?
Yeah, wait, are they drunk?
Yeah, they're drunk. We got talking about this week's episode and the importance of whiskey. And Eli was like, I've never really seen the appeal. And Cecil was like, well, you just haven't had the right one. And they ended up sharing an entire bottle.
You know what?
Between
We
them.
don't say I love you, but Cecil, you know I love you, right?
But why don't we say it? Because I love you.
I love you.
I do love
man.
you. I love you, man.
Yeah, you guys both said it now.
I see. Well, that will be interesting.
Okay, but wait, there's something I don't understand here.
Oh, yeah? What's that?
I mean, why didn't you have anything to drink? You're a whiskey guy, right?
Oh, me? Yeah, no, I very much am a whiskey guy. I had like a bottle and a half, something like that.
And you're...
Oh, no, I'm fine. I have a pretty good tolerance at this point.
Got it. Okay, no further questions.
Okay, I mean, I'd say like on a weekday.
I said
like,
no further questions.
Okay.
Hello and welcome to Citation Needed, the podcast where we choose a subject, read a single article about it on Wikipedia, and pretend we're experts, because this is the internet, and that's how it works now. I'm Eli Bosnick, and I'll be drying this glass absentmindedly as you walk in the door, but I'll need some high-proof companions. First up, the Jack Daniels and Fireball to my Malort, Heath and Noah.
What? No, absolutely. Reject the premise. Jack or Fireball, I don't really care which one I was. Either way, reject.
Yeah, unless I can light my bong with that Fireball, I've got no need for it, man.
You just needed to name 3 liquors, and you came up with like the 3 worst
I
possible
Googled
answers.
names of whiskeys.
Fuck.
Then the one I knew.
Malort is in there too.
I'm least offended by
And
Malort,
also
honestly.
joining us tonight, 2 men who like their bourbon like they like their dates in a barrel.
Were you looking at my barrel? Who the fuck are you, Nancy Grace? Get the fuck out of here.
All right, Eli, I'll tell you the same thing now I told you down on the docks. If you could think of something better than a barrel, I'm all ears. Like this barrel of ears. Just whatever.
Before we begin tonight, I'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons. Patrons, if it weren't for you, this fun, banter-filled weekly jeu de spui would fade like the summers of youth. And if you'd like to learn how to join their ranks, be sure to stick around till the end of the show. And with that out of the way, tell us, Cecil, what person, place, concept, phenomenon, or event will we be talking about today?
Today we're going to be talking about a thing. It's the Whiskey Rebellion. You missed that thing.
And Noah, you learned about this thing. Are you
You're
ready
just
to...
changing the format of the show again? Sometimes it's a thing.
This now is
Wow.
part of the format of the show. Like it's
Yeah.
just it's
Yeah,
happened.
it is. Yeah.
This is now part of the format of
So
the show.
tell us about the Whiskey Rebellion, eventually. Be sure to open it up with a bunch of arguably irrelevant context before you get to the point, though. That's
Thank
very-
you, Eli. I will.
Yeah.
I will.
Okay, back
Thank
to the
you.
format.
So yeah, as Americans, we generally recognize the birth of our nation as happening in 1776 when the Declaration of Independence was signed, which is kind of like dating the birth of your child to the first time you convinced your spouse to fuck you. Right? That's not right. The earliest you can really date it is 1783, since we hadn't won the Revolutionary War until then. But for most relevant purposes, the real birth year of our country was 1789. That's when George Washington was inaugurated as our first president, and the government established by the Constitution first got going. See, until then, the United States was more of a loose conglomeration of variably governed semi-sovereign states. But since that loose-knit coalition couldn't do shit like pay off war debts, it was replaced with the far more federalized system that we still more or less live with today. And the Whiskey Rebellion was the first real test of how that was going to work out.
spoiler alert, like everything else in the history of America, it goes badly.
Yeah.
Okay, except for the loose conglomeration of variably governed semi-sovereign states turned out to be a great system to manage through the pandemic.
Yeah, right? So the year is 1791. The U.S. has been truly independent for less than a decade, and it was being crushed under the debt that it had incurred in securing said independence. To finance the war, the nascent government ran up $54 million in debt, and the various states had also amassed an additional $25 million worth. When you adjust for inflation, we're talking about the equivalent of like $250 million. It was the need to service this debt more than anything that necessitated a stronger federal government. And eager to capitalize on that, Arch Federalist Alexander Hamilton, who was the Secretary of the Treasury at the time, proposed that the federal government buy up all the state debt to strengthen their hand. Needless to say, that was a real easy sell to the states.
Look, those states would have just gone to trade schools instead of university. They wouldn't be in this mess, would they?
All right, I'm not an economist, but they were going to fix the national debt crisis by buying more debt. Was Twitter next on their list of acquisitions? Or
No, because this actually worked ultimately.
Each state gets a blue check mark.
Yeah. Now, to this point, the federal government was almost entirely funded through import duties.
Duties.
Ha! Poo.
Okay.
Sorry.
And Hamilton
I
argued
laughed.
that they were already as high as they could reasonably get without serving as a huge impediment to business. So he proposed an internal tax. And since he knew that that was going to be unpopular as all hell, he specifically suggested a tax on alcohol. Right. So this was a luxury tax in as much as nobody needs alcohol to survive, Heath. And it was also a sin tax, which guaranteed.
On a weekday, I'm just whatever.
But in addition to that, though, it was also a sin tax, which guaranteed that America's prude class would get behind it. And we've always had a pretty huge class of prudes. So Hamilton proposed what would later be called the Whiskey Excise Act, also known as the Whiskey Act. Congress passed that act in March of 1791, and Washington appointed revenue inspectors in November of the same year.
Boo. Taxation is theft. Sovereign citizen. This is bullshit.
Yeah, so
Who is John Gall?
yeah. So
I told you this would happen.
as Hamilton and Heath predicted, the tax wasn't popular. It was particularly problematic out west. Now, this is 1791. So when I say out west, I don't mean California. I mean the mountains. No, not those ones. The eastern mountains. Right. At this time, the United States reaches as far west as the Mississippi River. But in terms of like the actual reach of the government, it doesn't even make it past the Appalachian Mountains. So when I say problems out west, I'm talking about Pittsburgh. Now, normally this story is told as like, as a bunch of drunken, illiterate, incorrigible Revolutionary War veterans who stopped listening 2 words into the no taxation without representation slogan. And there is definitely an element of that, especially late in the game. But the initial resistance to this tax was actually pretty well grounded. There were a lot of ways that the tax really favored Eastern population centers. Like, for example, the tax was 9 cents a gallon for distilled spirits, but you could pay a flat rate per still that could theoretically reduce that tax to 6 cents a gallon. But you could only really take advantage of that if you were distilling a fuck ton of booze. And most of the distillers out west were just farmers looking for something to do with their excess unsold grain crops.
Jesus Christ, invent a farm subsidy, you losers. Jesus.
Farm subsidy. Cecil, I think we could get him to trade the Electoral College for letting him put caffeine back into Four Loko, my guy. We don't need to. We don't need to farm
Those were so
subsidy
good.
it.
No, there were other reasons why the tax hit small Western distillers harder, too. For example, in poor parts of the country, a gallon of whiskey sold for less money, right? Since the tax wasn't based on sale price, it was necessarily regressive. The regions in question were also specie poor, right? So much so that they often used whiskey as a currency, which meant that for a lot of people that were poor enough, this effectively became an income tax. What's more, because it was a federal tax, anybody who didn't pay or had a complaint about how they were being charged for it had to take that to a federal court rather than a state court. And the nearest federal court to Pittsburgh was in Philadelphia. That was a hell of a journey for a cash-strapped farmer in the 1790s.
All right, so I'm going to Philadelphia to lodge my complaint. I tried pouring my whiskey down the coin slot for the toll road. That's legal tender, all debt, public-private. The arm won't lift up. It's fucking ridiculous. This is ridiculous.
Now, they say money can't buy happiness, but if the money is whiskey, it can absolutely buy a nice spot of oblivion, which is damn near as good.
You're just using the wrong thing as money then. Yeah. Now, to be clear, all those justifications are reasonable, and they certainly factored into people's resistance to the tax. But there's also just a huge contingent of people for whom it was just a case of, yeah, man, the government wants my money, but fuck them. There was also a feeling, and I feel like this persists even today for the Western U.S., but there was this feeling that the federal government was mostly doing shit for the people in the East, so why the fuck should the people in the West pay for it? But regardless of their reasoning, by and large, people in the Western U.S. just didn't pay this tax.
I'm so fucking fuck these ivory tower academics and their Common Core math. I don't know what's happening to me.
Right. And when you explain to these people that the government is doing more for the East because there are more people in the East, they, vote for a Nazi and get interviewed on CNN. So it's tricky. You got to be careful.
Yeah. Right. So at first, the opposition to the tax went mostly through official channels. Several petitions were sent seeking the repeal of the law, but when they failed, opposition leaders formed the convention to decide what to do next. This was convened in September of 1791, so this is before the government even started collecting the tax, in Pittsburgh, which was at the time a small frontier settlement of like just over 10,000 people. This convention was dominated by moderate voices who wanted to avoid an outbreak of violence above all things, and it did manage to negotiate a 1 cent reduction in the tax. That would not, however, be enough to stave off violence.
I'm not sure I can get whiskey prices down, but I can investigate Hunter Biden. Will that get your vote? Can I count on those?
All right, so listen, just in case anyone wants to know, adjusted for inflation, a 6 cent tax on whiskey is the equivalent to a $1.94 tax per fucking gallon in today's terms. And
Yeah, thanks, Biden.
The government was using this to fix a $76 million debt problem, which means America needed to drink 39,175,257 gallons of whiskey. And the population of the U.S. at that time was only about 3.9 million people. So if you're wondering why everyone is so belligerent about this, it's because they needed to drink 10 gallons of whiskey each to avoid insolvency.
It's a weird example. I don't even understand what you're trying to say.
Right? I feel like we're up to the challenge. Now, so
10 gallons.
The violence. So now the violence started light. I guess whatever the next step up from prank war is. On September 11th of 1791, a recently appointed tax collector named Robert Johnson was tarred and feathered. Not to be outdone, a different group nabbed some dude who was sent to serve warrants for non-payment of the tax, and he was also tarred and feathered, but whipped first.
Jesus.
And while this kind of shit was mostly confined to Western Pennsylvania, there was a strong resistance to the tax all through Appalachia. So actually, the only reason there wasn't violent retaliation against tax collectors in Kentucky is that they literally could not find anyone willing to try to collect taxes there.
Yeah, and if they would have tarred and feathered them, they would have fried them with 11 herbs and spices in Kentucky.
Right?
So.
Yeah, and it would have smelled really good, but it would have tasted like shit.
What is that? It's a secret. It's a secret. We're not telling you.
So another real hotspot for resistance was Western North Carolina. It got so bad that Alexander Hamilton was calling for armed military intervention there by 1792. And I should point out here that there's actually a lot of controversy about what exactly Hamilton's goals were with this whole thing. Right? Like, as Tom pointed out, the math doesn't really add up on this. And some people accuse Hamilton of trying to stoke a violent insurrection here just so that he would have an excuse to assert federal power and set that precedent. And given what we know about Alexander Hamilton, it's entirely possible that he would do something like that. Several of his moves seem conveniently timed to stoke the most possible outrage.
All right, he put out a diss track on a mixtape making fun of us in Carolina. I don't even know what that means. Why does he keep rhyming everything?
No, to be clear, I really don't know how credible the accusations against Alexander Hamilton are here. Like, they have a lot of the hallmarks of historical conspiracy theories in so much as they invest a ton of power and foresight in one guy and force us to believe that somehow that one guy was all the way inside the heads of all of his opponents, even the backwood frontiersmen half a country away from him. So I don't know. But regardless of whether he set out to get a violent insurrection or not, that's what he got. In August of 1792, there was a second convention in Pittsburgh to discuss resistance to the tax, and this time, the voices of moderation that dominated the first round of talks stayed home. This convention was dominated instead by a group called the Mingo Creek Association, and they were all the way in on calling for violent resistance. So much so that after the convention, they raised liberty poles and took control of the local militia.
All right. Well, Noah's spilling the hot goss on 1792 political intrigue, so while I go put in my dentures and powder my wig, we'll take a quick break for apropos of nothing.
I call this second convention of Pittsburgh to order. Mr. Secretary, would you like to open?
I would. My fellow countrymen, I know the weight we, in our fine nation, bear is not a small one, but this tax, should it so serve the people, shall be the foundation on which our nation's freedom was founded. I beg you, do your duty.
Yes, well said, well said. And now, the representative from the Mingo Creek Association.
Yeah. So, first of all, fuck that guy.
Jesus, that's a lot.
Oh, yeah, hey, fuck all y'all too. Scooter's dad done let him order nunchucks off the internet. And if you try to tax our wet can, he's gonna crack your skull open like he did his cousin. Ain't that right, Scoot? Yeah. Ow. Well, whatever. He's good. Anyway, the end or whatever. It's your microphone now.
Gentlemen, there is only one reasonable course of action here. We must take these people very seriously and rearrange our electoral system so that their vote counts 8 times more than ours.
Any y'all here a doctor? Scooter done tore his ball sack by sitting on that ninja star.
Equal American.
Ordered it out of Black Belt magazine.
And we're back. When we left off, Noah was telling a fascinating historical anecdote, but it was about poor people, so Tom and I were not listening.
Jesus Christ.
So tell us, Noah, what was the Whiskey Rebellion?
All right, so when Hamilton hears reports of the second convention, he sends a fellow by the name of George Clymer to Western Pennsylvania to investigate, and apparently Clymer is a Class A boob. Okay, so he makes the trip in a half-assed disguise, and he tries to intimidate local officials when he shows up. And then when he reports back to Hamilton, he exaggerates the hell out of the situation and makes it sound way more dire than it was, which is exactly, of course, what Hamilton wanted. In response, Hamilton drafted a presidential proclamation denouncing resistance to the law, and after being twice toned down by different editors, Washington signed it on September 5th of 1792.
George Clymer's fake mustache just pulling off one side of his face. So you wouldn't know where I could find a rebellion anywhere around. Oh, hang on. Now it's my eyebrow. Okay, look, the guy said the glue was going to hold. It's hot and I'm sweat. I'll just make something up. So I was sorry about it.
This Hamilton guy got to watch his temper. He could end up a boring musical.
Oh,
I thought it was good.
Not a boring
I don't like hip hop.
musical. So now you got to keep in mind that this was more about saving face than securing revenue at this point, right? So the reputation America had in Europe was of being unreasonable and ungovernable. And here you've got an armed rebellion against a relatively minor act of government. And keep in mind that the capital at the time was in Philadelphia. So the view from afar is of this fledgling federal government that can't even enforce a law within its own fucking state.
Yeah, well, after January 6th, that's the view from both close up and afar.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah.
Sure is.
So about the same time, the Mingo Creek Association is ramping up its harassment efforts. In August of 1792, they go after a tax inspector named General John Neville. He's rented a room in Pittsburgh for his tax collection office, but after the Mingo Creek Association threatened the landlord, he agreed to evict Neville. They also went after anybody who would comply with the tax, issuing warnings in the form of anonymous notes in newspapers and retaliations in the form of burned barns and broken stills.
Hey, guys, the op-ed section started with "Fuck you, Dave, Anonymous." I don't know what to do with that.
So shit went on like this for 2 fucking years. Tax inspectors would try to collect money. Angry crowds would burn them in effigy. In 1793, a crowd broke into one tax collector's house and forced him to surrender his commission at gunpoint. In 1794, 30 men surrounded the house of a local tax collector in Morgantown, Virginia, and he felt so threatened that he disguised himself as a slave and swam across a river to get away from the mob.
Republicans, if you allowed actual history to be taught, you could say, see, once in a while, blackface is justified.
I still think the banjo was weird. I know that it's part of the
flotation device, Eli. Now, so meanwhile, Alexander Hamilton is looking at this tinderbox and he's like, well, this needs a fucking match. So he convinces a federal attorney to issue subpoenas to more than 60 distillers in Western Pennsylvania that hadn't paid the tax. Now, again, I don't know if Hamilton was really trying to stoke insurrection here, but the fact that he pushed for this days before the government was about to change the rules so that state courts could take care of the tax disputes strongly suggests that he knew what he was doing. Anyway, one way or the other, they send a federal marshal named David Lennox to serve these writs to basically the leaders of the armed resistance at this point.
Dude's just walking in like the guys who flew to Afghanistan to try and catch bin Laden. Hi, you all, y'all are under arrest. Please.
No. Where's the fucking rhymey guy? He can't speak for himself.
Yeah, right.
Where's the rhymey
Yeah.
guy out here?
Busy.
Now, accompanying Lennox when he goes to serve these subpoenas is General Neville. And they serve most of them without incident, but late one evening, as they're heading up to one particular farm, somebody fires a couple warning shots at them. Both men are like, well, fuck it, it doesn't matter that much, and they turn around. Neville heads to his home. Lennox retreats all the way to Pittsburgh, but the Mingo Creek militia decides to retaliate. So dozens of them gather outside of Neville's house and demand that he send out the federal marshal, who, to be clear, isn't there. When he fails to comply, they open fire.
Oh, man, if he uses a force field, this is going to be a Joseph Smith situation. I know a Joseph Smith situation.
I gotta say, though, I do miss the old-timey way of solving problems. Like, I wish every time I got a bill, I could just, like, hop in the car and beat the hell out of the guy who sent it to me and then something debt forgiven.
Yeah, right, no, yeah. Yeah, it's got a lot of appeal. So Neville defends his house with the help of his slaves, and when they're unable to dislodge him, the militia retreats. Now, Neville is a former general. He's still got a lot of pull in the U.S. military, so he rustles up 10 Army soldiers stationed nearby under the command of his brother-in-law, Major Abraham Kirkpatrick. The militia, for their part, also goes and gets reinforcement. And where Neville scrounged up 10 men, the Mingo Creek Association scrounged up like 600 of them.
Nice.
Yeah. Needless to say, the ensuing Battle of Bower Hill didn't go great for Neville's side.
Neville walks outside. Okay. I see we both have an army of some amount. How about this? I'll stop if you stop. Ty?
Also, just at some point in history, you could borrow some soldiers if there were some laying around nearby.
Right?
What?
Yeah.
It's like take a soldier, leave a soldier in a bucket.
Now, of course, Neville lucks out in all of this because the first command that Kirkpatrick gives when he arrives is for Neville to get the fuck out of there. So he's not even there when the shooting starts. And the shooting goes on for like an hour before the rebel leader gets fatally shot. That enraged the militia, so they just set the house on fire, and that forced a pretty quick surrender. Now, the casualty numbers are actually a little hazy here, but at least one and possibly as many as 3 militia rebels die, and 1 U.S. soldier may have died. So it's between 1 and 4. Kirkpatrick was taken prisoner, but the rest of the soldiers were allowed to leave, and apparently Kirkpatrick escaped soon after anyway.
Feels like this whole act in Hamilton needs to be set to yakety sax, man. What the fuck?
Okay, but these are the arms you have the right to bear, everybody, okay? The kind where the army and a militia have a shootout and maybe 4 people get shot.
Right, yeah, at the high end, yeah.
Well, it is 1791. The shooting lasted an hour. Let me go ahead and check my musket loading, timing, and inflation guide. Got it. Okay, 3 shots total fire. Well played, gentlemen.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, maybe less than that. They hadn't invented the B unit yet, so who even knows, right? So, needless to say, this exchange galvanized both sides. The federal government has no choice but to respond to an armed militia firing on U.S. soldiers, and the rebels now have this martyr right, in the form of the leader who was killed at Bower Hill. And well, it's not super clear at this point. The story at the time was that he had been killed while trying to call a ceasefire. So it was being sold to the insurrectionists as a straight up murder. Now, the rebels were also feeling increasingly emboldened after their win, and they made a few pretty dumb moves, which included robbing a mail carrier that was on its way out of Pittsburgh so they could read all the letters and figure out which of the townspeople were talking shit about them. They were also increasingly divorced from any concrete political goals. Yeah, right. Right. Yeah, exactly. No, they were also increasingly divorced from any concrete political goals. Right. Like, so the overwhelming majority of people involved at this point weren't distillers or farmers of any kind. And the suggestions at their next meeting were mostly involved to, like, just pillaging Pittsburgh and making off with all the rich people's loot. They even talked about declaring Yeah, right. So they even talked about declaring independence and forming their own country, or joining with England or Spain.
You know who won't tax us? England.
Yeah, that has to be like an awkward conversation. Okay, England. Now listen, I know I said some things, maybe killed some people, but I've grown. In fact, I think we've both grown. Hello, England.
Are you telling me you don't want Western Pennsylvania? What? Hello? So at this point, Washington has no choice but to respond. And that's Washington the dude, of course, not the euphemism for the federal government. He sends a few delegates with the mission of finding a peaceful resolution to the whole conflict, but he also starts mobilizing the military. He calls up state militias from New Jersey, Maryland, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. In all, he called up 12,950 men, which by the standard of the time was a substantial force. Now, I should note that this mobilization had a bit of a rebellion knock-on effect because, you know, no fucking buddy wanted to go to war with a bunch of hillbillies over the price of whiskey, so they had to make up for the shortfall in volunteers with a draft. And as with every draft in U.S. history, this one led to protests and unrest. Hell, the fucking governor of Maryland had to send out 800 men to quash an anti-draft riot and ended up arresting over 150 people. But eventually they filled out the ranks and ended up with an overwhelming force to bring to bear against, again, Pittsburgh. And lest we forget, I should emphasize once again that the entire city at this time had fewer residents than the army that was marching on it.
Woof. Just one guy at that meeting with Washington. Hey, what if we just tax rich people and stop doing the whiskey? Get the fuck out, Bernie. Nobody likes you. Get the fuck out.
Come on, I'm only 70 years old.
Yeah, right.
I love their boy, these taxes are unpopular. I bet a draft will cure it. We're a democracy.
Jesus. Now, of course, once you've got a fuck ton of amped up, armed up guys, many of whom don't even want to be there, you start getting a certain amount of violence inevitably. So there are several examples of civilians getting bayoneted or shot while resisting this force on their march across the state. But with those few exceptions, this is a largely bloodless affair. Even before the advance force makes its way to Pittsburgh, the rebels are already surrendering. The very act of gathering the army was enough to put down any rebellion. In fact, the mobilization is really only noteworthy now because it's the only time that a sitting president commanded troops in the field. Now, in a sense, both sides claim victory on this one, right? So the rebels laid down their arms and they stopped tarring and feathering tax collectors, but they didn't start paying the tax. Only a handful of people were tried for their crimes. Only a few of them were convicted. And though two of them were sentenced to hang, both of those guys were later pardoned, as was everyone else convicted involved with this. So nobody got in any real trouble for it. And in fact, the Whiskey Rebellion and the general resistance to the tax that caused it were huge factors in the election of Thomas Jefferson. And one of his first acts was to repeal this tax. And the memory of the rebellion was such a cautionary tale that the federal government would continue to subsist only on import fees until the War of 1812.
Just a bunch of bears in New Hampshire spreading the rumor that the government wanted to charge taxes for garbage collection.
All right, so that's the end of the story, and it should be the end of the essay, but it can't be because there's just this one other thing that I need to share with you that is almost but not quite entirely unrelated. So when I pulled up this article on Wikipedia, I noticed a tag at the top that said not to be confused with the Whiskey War. And always on the lookout for a good citation needed topic as I am, I decided to click through and see what the fuck that was, and it was the most adorably Canadian thing that you can imagine.
Okay. So Wait, Ryan Reynolds does a puzzle in footy pajamas?
Celine
This
Dion's
is
pug
old-timey, right?
judging a poutine contest.
Cuter even than that. So this all centers around this inhospitable spit of Arctic rock that sits midway between Canada and Greenland. It's tiny. It's half a square mile, and it's uninhabited, even if you're including like plants and lichen in your census. Okay. But that didn't stop Canada and Denmark from arguing and ultimately technically going to war over it in something that the Wikipedia article describes as a, quote, pseudo confrontation. See, in 1973, when the two countries signed their border treaty, they didn't bother to specify who owned this little turd of rock because who fucking cares?
Okay, point of clarification, Noah. It is not a pseudo confrontation. I believe the term now is special military operation.
Oh, okay, yeah. So in 1984, Canadian soldiers provoked Denmark by planting a Canadian flag in the island. And honestly, looking at pictures of the place, I don't know how the fuck you would do that without a jackhammer. But they put up a Canadian flag and they left a bottle of whiskey there. And then the Danish Minister of Greenland Affairs personally travels to the little island, takes down the Canadian flag, puts up a Danish flag, and leaves a little bottle of schnapps and a letter that says, "Welcome to this Danish island." The two countries continue to take turns swapping out the flags, each time, by the way, folding each other's flag properly and respectfully, et cetera, and leaving bottles of liquor for fucking decades.
I know for the uninitiated, it seems like Canada was adorably leaving a bottle of whiskey there as a gift, but I want to clear this up. It was Canadian whiskey and they were just throwing it out. Like, that's what you do with Canadian whiskey.
Man, if Heath ever had a calling, it's sitting on an island by himself drinking whiskey. Do they have a guy doing cleanup?
Yeah.
Do we know?
So now, eventually, the two countries agreed to settle the issue like two cantankerous siblings in an 80s sitcom by drawing a line right down the middle. But even that agreement wasn't finalized until this year, and that was largely done as a way of Canada and Denmark saying, "Hey, Russia, look how easy it is to settle border disputes." So just being a line that everybody agrees on. No word whether this has had any effect on Putin yet, but we will keep you posted.
And if you had to summarize what you've learned in one sentence, what would it be?
That inebriant-based rebellions are probably not the most effective kind.
And are you ready for the quiz?
Let me take a quick drink, and yes.
All right. Noah, which of the following is the best song from the musical Hamilton 2, The Whiskey Rebellion? A, Alexander Hamilton. B, Aaron Burr cirrhosis. Aaron Burr is one of the songs in that. Cirrhosis of the liver because it drinks. Or C, My Shot.
Those are good.
Oh, it's a tough one. I think it is C, My Shot.
That is correct. Well done.
All right, Noah, what's the best movie about the Whiskey Rebellion? A, The War of the Four Roses. B, Liquor License to Kill. C, Bulletproof. That's a doubler there. Proof is also alcohol. Okay, forget it. All right, D, Rye Hard.
All right, it was a slow burn, man. It took a minute to build up, but by the time it got there, it was worth it. I'm going to go with D, Rye Hard.
Absolutely. It is a Christmas movie.
All right, Noah. When drinking all night, sometimes the system needs to, shall we say, reset. What is this sometimes called? A dry heaving martini. B, a mo-o-no-ito. C, a long I don't feel so good Lind iced tea. D, a lemon drop me off at home. Or E, a whiskey rebellion.
All right, so you're trying to trick me with E, a whiskey rebellion. I think it is a dry heaving martini.
It is a whiskey rebellion. That is the answer that you got wrong.
No, it isn't. It isn't actually. It's
no, it turns out it wasn't the thing you said. Hey, Noah wins.
Good for me. I would like a Cecil essay next week.
All right. Well, for Tom, Noah, Cecil, and Heath,
And Heath?
I'm Eli. Thanking you for hanging out with us today. We'll be back next week, and by then, Cecil will be an expert on something else. Between now and then, you can listen to the ribald fun of Tom and Cecil over on Cognitive Dissonance. You can listen to the plodding deference of Tom and I over on Dear Old Dads, and you can hear Noah, Heath, and myself review Christian movies over on our podcasts. And if you'd like to keep this show going, you can make a per-episode donation at patreon.com/citationpod or leave us a 5-star review anywhere you can. And if you'd like to get in touch with us, don't do that. Check out past episodes, connect with us on social media, or check the show notes. Be sure to check out citationpod.com.
Cecil, wake up. Dude, what are you doing here? Oh, my head. Oh, my head.
Camping? Remember? Those Rockies aren't going to hike themselves, silly.
Did I say we do that?
Did we say we'd do that? It was practically your idea. Now, come on. We got to get walking because I don't know where the Rockies are.
Oh, God.
Dude, you did say you'd go camping with him. You did say that.
Heath, what are you doing here? Did you get drunk too?
No. I was just lonely.
Sad. You made the end of this episode sad.
It's not sad if you say I can stay, hang out with you guys. Did you want to say that? Did you want to say that I could stay and hang out? Cecil? Can't end the episode because I'm still talking right now. I'm still talking. This is me. I'm just vamping it up. Still. Flabberjammer. Say I can stay, please, Cecil? Cecil? Why would I say flabberjammer right there? That's weird.